Okay, if you like Billy Idol, listen to him back in the 80s, you're going to really enjoy this video, I think. What I did is I found an old newspaper review, a record review of the album Rebel Yell by Billy Idol. Of course, you remember that song. And that album, I always liked Billy Idol, but that album, the album Rebel Yell, is just absolutely amazing. Matter of fact, I have my copy of it here. And this is Rebel Yell. You might remember this from the 80s. And it was kind of interesting because this is Steve Stevens, and he became really Billy Idol's kind of partner, songwriting partner. And this was, for all intents and purposes, his second album. There was another album that was just called Billy Idol that came out before this in 1982, and that's the one that had the song White Wedding on it. And then this one, of course, had Rebel Yell, Flesh for Fantasy, Eyes Without a Face, and the rest of the album I didn't care much for, but those three songs were so unbelievably incredible. They were so good. This came out in 1983, and there was another album actually that came out before the first one that was called Don't Stop, and it was an EP, and it had the song Dancing With Myself on it. And Dancing With Myself, of course, was left over from a band he was in prior to being a solo artist, and the band was called Generation X, and you know the song Dancing With Myself, Well, I'm going to show you the inside of this, because there's one kind of interesting thing that he did with his records. This is a really cool picture. This is on the inside sleeve, and then you'll notice here, my copy of it's kind of gotten ripped a little bit. But you'll notice here that what we have is 3 and 4. And what that is it's actually, instead of saying side 1 and side 2, it's side 3 and side 4. And if you go back to Billy Idol's first album, the one that has White Wedding on it, it has side 1 and 2. His second album has side 3 and 4. And then if you go to Whiplash Smile, which is his next album, that one has sides 5 and 6. Now, I actually really like Billy Idol. I saw him in concert back, it was on that, actually the Whiplash Smile tour, so it had to be 1986. And I went and saw him, and the Cult was opening up for Billy Idol. I didn't even know who the Cult was. And I've told a little bit about my stories related to how much I love the Cult, but I didn't know anything about them when I showed up to the concert. And they were the opening band, and the girl that I went with knew who they were. She knew the song She Sells Sanctuary. Anyway, they were amazing. I fell in love with them, bought all their stuff afterwards. But anyway, back to Billy Idol. I was mentioning just a second ago, this guy right here, Steve Stevens, kind of became his songwriting partner and his visual partner too. Because between the two of these guys, they had this really cool image. And if you see him today, you'll always see him still with Steve Stevens. Steve Stevens is a guitar player. He's actually an amazing, truly amazing guitar player. And when I saw Billy Idol on that tour, the Whiplash Smile tour, it was one of the, strangely enough, the best I could describe it, and of course I was 16, 17 years old at the time, was that it was classy. The whole stage looked almost empty, and Steve Stevens, instead of having a wall of Marshall amplifiers, he just had one half stack sitting right next to him on the stage. It was just this giant stage with almost nothing on it. It was so cool. And Billy Idol just had this really interesting energy about him, and he had this great image, and if you remember him from back in the 80s, he just had this thing about him that was just so unbelievably cool. And those 3 songs on here, the ones that I mentioned, are so good. And it's not just that they're good songs, it's that the production of the value is so good. When you listen to the song Flesh for Fantasy, for example, just go pop that thing on sometime and listen to just how clear it is, how perfect the instrument sounds. It's just, however it got produced, it was done so well. It's so spectacular. And anyway, so I wonder what I found here that I think you're going to really like. It's a record review for this album. And it's almost sitting here. This was written in 1983, December 4th of 1983. This article is in the Cincinnati Enquirer on page 100. And it's almost comical the way they write about Billy Idol in a couple of places, because this guy isn't a huge fan. And he gives the record Rebel Yell a 3-star, which is good. And then he kind of talks about what his feelings are. So anyway, the title of this article is Billy Idol, the Rich Little of Rock. Now, for those of you that don't remember, Rich Little was an impersonator, and he was the guy that could do all those different voices of all the people. And there's a reason, as we read this article, you'll hear why he refers to Billy Idol as the Rich Little of rock. So check this out. Without MTV, Billy Idol and Adam Ant would have to work for a living. Instead, they make records, sing songs, and do videos to show off their musical fantasies and the latest additions to their earring collections. On Rebel Yell, Idol's new album, a black vinyl disc that people listened to before there were videos, there are no moving pictures, just music. He doesn't watch horror film escapees climb skyscrapers at a single bound. He doesn't chat with mannequins. He doesn't do any of that MTV stuff. What Idol does do, according to his record company, Chrysalis Records, is speak for the totally new music scene for the 80s, a new generation, taking over with genuine emotions and genuine courage. Whoa, big fella. Ease up on that new music scene for the 80s debris. Billy Idol may be a new face for the 80s, but his voice is pure late 60s, circa Jim Morrison of The Doors. And that's actually a really interesting comparison, because when you got into the 80s and you had so many rockers that were, I don't know, that started seeing how high they could sing. And that wasn't true for everybody. I mean, you get people like Depeche Mode and Echo and the Bunnymen. They weren't doing that stuff. But you get into a lot of the rock music, and there were so many people just trying to be Robert Plant. And then you had somebody like Billy Idol that was not like that at all. And his point here is he kind of had more of that Jim Morrison. It was an attitude. He had that kind of lower baritone voice. And anyway, so he just makes that comparison. Idol's voice tones are extraordinarily close to Morrison's. When he moans, "What Sets You Free" on Rebel Yell, or screams on Crank Call, he produces that same head-cold sound Morrison achieved before he joined the all-star Dead Band. Other Doorsian effects on Rebel Yell are the repeated use of echo effects on Idol's vocals and his half-spoken, half-sung delivery behind accompaniments that go from still and stark to wild and crazy. I got it. I love Billy Idol's voice. And the thing that he was referring to a second ago, "What set you free and brought you to me, babe," from Rebel Yell, it's so cool. I love how he sounds on that. I think he sounds great. He's so awesome. Let's see, stark, vivid, crazy. Idol's vocals, half-spoken, half-sung delivery behind accompaniments that go from still and stark to wild and crazy. Those thematic changes save Rebel Yell from being just another monotonous offering from a member of the post-punk set. When Idol makes dance music, Flesh for Fantasy, for example, he does it with taste and good sense. The song's changing themes and Idol's voice have many colors. Now he's Johnny Mathis. Now he's David Bowie. Now he's Michael Jackson. Now he's Neil Diamond. Now he's Jim Morrison. Every once in a while, he's even Billy Idol. Prove that Billy Idol. Prove that 80s dance music does not have to be unmercifully mindless. The album's best cut, The Dead Next Door, also recalls The Doors. Idol's lyrics make no sense, but that's okay. Jim Morrison's psychobabble didn't either. In this case, the subject matter doesn't matter. Idol's voice does. His tone is so eerie, it makes you want to draw the shades and nail them shut, so you can't possibly catch a glimpse of The Dead Next Door. I actually, that's like, I think the last song on the album. I don't like that song at all, but anyway, that's his favorite. It's kind of this slower, eerie kind of thing. And then he goes on and he continues his talking about Adam Ant, who's the other part of this review. Anyway, but that's what he was saying about Billy Idol back in 1983 when he was reviewing Rebel Yell. And if you heard this album, owned this album, or liked Billy Idol back then, or even have memories of that period, because as it said there at the beginning, and I think that's really, it's actually, you know, a pretty fair statement. Without MTV, Billy Idol and Adam Ant would have to work for a living. I don't know that Billy depended on MTV to be successful, because I think these songs were so spectacular that they stood on their own. Because you go back to Dance With Myself and White Wedding, and they were great songs without MTV. But for sure, MTV helped his really good music get put on the map in a way they never could have otherwise. So I don't agree that he would have ended up working a day job, because I think he was way, way better than that. And he was being successful with Generation X and a little bit in his solo career before MTV showed up. But that did help considerably. Anyway, if you remember this stuff, if you liked Billy Idol and you remember this stuff from the 80s and the MTV generation and that kind of stuff, or if you saw him in concert like I did, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. So anyway, please follow the channel, like the video, leave comments, and with that, have a fantastic day.